Hey everybody, it's Carm here, coming to you on a late Wednesday afternoon, early evening. Felt like coming on and doing something I hadn't done in a while, and it's sort of showcase a particular label. I know over the last couple of years I've shown, I've done a few ECM videos and did a Narada one back in the springtime, which actually I just got a comment on that video from a new subscriber who was also asking about Windham Hill, would I consider doing a video on that label. And eventually I do want to. I have quite a bit, I've picked up over the years, and it's up there among my favorites. But this is a different label, actually more related to ECM, and that's the Japo label. I believe, I'm not real clear on the history, but I believe it started right around the same time as ECM, although independent of the label, right around 69 or 70. And later, I'm not sure, it either merged or perhaps ECM bought the label. And you could see on some of the mid-70s onwards, a lot of the records had, it was an ECM / Japo production, or the other way around. And it's fuzzy. Yeah, I've never been able to think of Japo without thinking of ECM, and so there's certainly that connection. They share some of the production team, and a lot of the artists kind of crossed over from one label to the other. And to me, Japo has probably a little more in the way of quirkiness, maybe a certain raw aspect, which ECM had a lot of in the early days, and continues to, depending on the artist and project. But yeah, I just got together maybe 10 or 12 or so Japos. I don't have nearly all of them. Anytime I see a Japo, I'm very anything on the label, I'm very happy to find it. But I think they might have done maybe between 40 and 50 albums in all, from around roughly 15 years that they existed, I think. So yeah, let's just start right in with something I found not too long ago, maybe within the past year. Rava, quotation marks. Enrico Rava, a great Italian trumpeter. This is called from two sessions, I think one in 73 and one in 74, in two different groups. You can see the lineup there. Really some stellar names there. You got John Abercrombie's in there, Herb Bushler, bass, Jack DeJohnette. I mean, a lot of names I wasn't familiar with. It has an insert here that kind of, has the sessions on there. There's some, looks like some poetry to accompany the music. And there's the two sessions, one from 73 and one from 74. Yeah, one was recorded in New York and the other in Buenos Aires. Although they do have kind of similar sounds in ways. It's at times it's somewhat fusion-like, very Latin tinged for the most part, and there's a few pieces that sound very much like what Miles Davis was doing at the time, maybe a little earlier, like the early '70s fusion. Here's an example of the label design. On the later records, it changed a bit, but it was what the early one looked like. But really a great record, one I wasn't even aware of. I didn't know he had recorded for the label. I have his, my favorite of his is Pilgrim in the Stars. But yeah, this is a really nice one. I was really fortunate to meet him, see him live about maybe 6 or 7 years ago. This club downtown. Very nice man. He treated me like an old friend. It was really, it was very nice. And still a great player. So I would definitely recommend this if you like, somewhere between like kind of a Latin fusion and again a little bit of that early Miles Davis sound. Great stuff. Next here, Magog, a group I wasn't familiar with before finding this. Let's see, this one's from 1974. And a lot of, at the time, a lot of unfamiliar names. I love, their covers are just about as evocative and interesting as ECM. And again, they have a lot of the same, Dieter Bonhorst does the cover design, which I think also did with ECM, and Martin Wieland, one of the engineers. So yeah, a lot of the same team. There's the various players, again, who I wasn't familiar with before. This goes somewhere between not really fusion, but somewhat straight ahead, somewhat freeform. At times they almost sound like a larger group than what they are. It's just the six of them, but I think that has a lot to do with the horns. Gives it almost kind of a big band feel at times, but great individual performances too. But yeah, really nice. Kind of goes between, again, kind of more freeform and straight ahead, and yeah, it was just a nice. A pretty good example of the label, kind of a nice balance between, the freer and more straight ahead aspects. This next one's a terrific one, really a lot of fun. System Tandem, Juri Stiven and Rudolf Dasik. This one's another fairly recent one within the last year. Actually, I'd heard this on YouTube. I can't remember if the entire album is up there in its entirety, but certainly a few cuts from it. You can see another really neat cover. Looks like maybe a mosquito. And it's just a duet for Juri Stiven on alto sax, soprano, flute, alto flute recorder, and Rudolf Dasik on guitar, electric guitar. And it's from another one from 1974. Really tight dynamic playing and interplay between the two. The saxophone in particular is just really smoking throughout. Really, there's a certain, again, speaking of like the quirkiness of some of the stuff in the label, a lot of times when I'm listening to this, I can't help but think of like those old road buddy movies from this period, from the 70s, where you have a couple of characters that would just come together and they would go on these adventures, driving and just getting into all kinds of interesting situations. I think of like the movie Scarecrow, from around this time, the early 70s, and a lot of it sounds like it could be like a soundtrack to certain moments in the story. And his flute playing on here, Juri's, is really very. I forget like the technique where you're sort of singing through the flute or vocalizing and playing at the same time. Not exactly multiphonics, but there's something similar. But yeah, there's just like a quirky charm, but it's such good playing. The guitar he does a lot of fast strumming, very rhythmic, being the only, just the two of them. But yeah, it just really adds a lot to, they make the most of it just being the two of them, but yeah, very raw and very, very powerful and interesting stuff. One I'd really recommend if you, especially like the smaller groups. This next one's another real heavy one. Purbeck Juice, Philosophy of the Flugelhorn. I'm thinking of Gary, who's like myself, is really a big lover of the solo instrumentalist album, where you have the one person playing everything. Not exactly like a one-man band, but they're just doing it all, overdubbing. And you can see, of course, primarily a flugelhorn player, but also plays. Apparently he seems to play bass on here. There's two basses, bass recorder, bamboo flutes, mellophones, vibraphone. Just a great variety on here of instruments and instrumental colors. Let's see, recorded 73, and he not only composes and plays everything, he does the cover, the artwork. So yeah, it must be self-portrait. And if you look really close, you could really see a lot of interesting things going on. One of those artworks you could really free associate on, and kind of changes each time you see it. And the music is similarly impressionistic and surrealistic. The first cut, which is by far the longest, is a good example of that. It has a lot of nature sounds, like bird sounds, which didn't hear a whole lot in recordings back then. But a lot of the record has kind of a brooding quality, almost dirge-like, but also playful as well. Sometimes it's droning, sometimes it's more rhythmic. But yeah, the way in which he utilizes the instruments, even kind of a long form, with the brass and the woodwinds, the way they're mixed up, and some of the pieces he does with the vibes brings to mind Tom Vandergeld, who also recorded on the label some albums. Oh, those are ones that I didn't think to pull. I have a couple of his that are really nice. But yeah, this is a really neat album. Again, if you like that solo artist, instrumentalist, I mean, this is a really good example. And yeah, one I didn't know about until, again, fairly recently, within the last maybe couple of years. I have one other of his on the label called, I think it's called Daybreak, which is more orchestral, but this is, yeah, again, just being, he's doing everything on here, and it's, makes it really special. So, very cool. Now, this is one that had been on the list for quite a while. Bar Phillips, For All It Is. Yeah, I'm thinking of my fellow Bar Phillips lovers, Gary and Andrew. I know also great admirers of this artist. Great composer, improviser, bass player. This one's from 1971, and it has a whole nice conglomeration of incredible bass players. You got Barry Guy, Pal Danielson, J.F. Jenny Clark, and Stu Martin on percussion. Now the first cut, Just 8, is probably just about the most straight ahead and melodic and accessible piece on the album. I would say that with with caution, whereas the rest of it sounds very much free improv, where they just kind of go for it. There's a lot of I've heard the term extended technique, where they really kind of take their instruments to the limits of what they can do technically, whether with the bow or without the bow. But yeah, if you're a fan of acoustic bass, especially improvised, I mean, this is really kind of what's known as a feast for the ears. And again, another really cool label design. Armin Becker does this one, and this one was produced by Bar Phillips. So yeah, this was something I'd been kind of after for a while, and finally found it, I think sometime in the late summer. But yeah, really really enjoyable, and again, very, very challenging listening. It's not something to be put on for the background. And the last piece of the album, YM, is also one that's a little more accessible. But another great example of early Japo and early Bar Phillips. I think he did one with Dave Holland at the time too, a duet album, I think in the same year. This is an all-time favorite group right here. Montfort Scoof Quintet, Scales. I've been into this for a very long time. And this is another really nice sparse cover, almost as much like ECM as it is Japo. In fact, yeah, it has Japo production, but it has the ECM logo on there. So I think at that point they were merged, or kind of in tandem there. Yeah, you have Montfort Scoof trumpet, flugelhorn, Michael Piltz bass clarinet. Well, I believe that's his sole instrument, kind of like Steve Lacy with the soprano sax, and is really a standout on here. Jasper Van Hoff, piano, electric piano, and organ, another great player. Gunter Lentz on bass, and Ralph Huebner on drums. I think played on Eberhard Weber's first Clos de Clos, first ECM album. Yeah, another one of those albums, a great combination of tight composition and playing, really nice interplay, and improvisation. Each soloist really goes for it when they get into it. But it also has a great sense of space and dynamics, and kind of allowing the music to breathe and just kind of take its own course. But it could also be very high energy and frenetic at times. I have another one of theirs, I think called Light Lines, and they also had a really nice box set that came out. Oh no, actually no, I'm thinking of a different. It wasn't a box set. It was I believe it was a double album, which was kind of a compilation of their 3 albums they did at the time. It was really nice. But yeah, this is a great one. 1976. Yeah, Town Studio Bauer, Ludwigsburg. Martin Wieland as the engineer, so a lot of kind of like the ECMs. It was produced by a fellow named Thomas Stowsand, who did a lot of production work on these on the early Japos. So yeah, another highly recommended group. His trumpet playing kind of reminds me of Kenny Wheeler, coming to think of it. This is another one that's a fairly recent find. Contact Trio, New Marks. This one's from 1978, and it's a really nice trio, guitar, bass, and percussion. This kind of brings to mind the Gateway Trio with Abercrombie, Howland, and DeJohnette. Yeah, he plays electric and acoustic guitars on here, kind of in a similar style and approach. I'm guessing that was it sounds to be like an inspiration for this. Now the bass, it's hard to tell whether it's an amplified, maybe like a fretless bass guitar, or like a processed acoustic bass. It kind of reminds me of Eberhard Weber in some ways. I'm guessing it's a processed acoustic bass, maybe played with like a pedal. And the percussionist also plays Marimba vibes. And another one that kind of goes between straight ahead, free, a nice balance between those, as well as at times some nice psychedelic touches. And another one that just has that kind of quirky quality, where it's a little hard to pin down, exactly how you would define it. But it gave this a fresh listen the other day, and it's another one you listen to it each time, and it kind of offers something new. But another really nice representation, and I'm guessing this is one a little later in the history. I don't think Japo went. I don't think it went too many years longer. Yeah, Japo ECM, kind of a joint production, but. Yeah, very, very nice stuff. An all-time favorite artist here, and one who I think is so... I never like the term underrated. I would say underappreciated, or just if there's such a term as underknown. Not unknown, but just less well-known as he should be. Stefan Mikas, Implosions. This might have been his first album for the label, March 1977. Maybe first or second. He's pictured there playing an instrument called a sho, S-H-O, a wind instrument from, I'm not sure, it might be, I think it's Japanese. On the back here it says, it kind of sums it up really nicely. The music on this album is not Japanese, Indian, Afghani, not Bavarian. It is not traditional music. Call it what you will. There has been the sincere desire to understand the essence of these cultures. And really, he's an incredible multi-instrumentalist who's researched instruments from all over the world for the last 40 years, at least 40 years. And to this day, he's still playing and recording and all overdubbed, plays everything himself. There's a few albums where he plays with other musicians, but for the most part he's doing everything. And yeah, you can see the instrumentation on here. There's shakuhachi, sitar, vocals, and irregular acoustic guitar, but just really incredible, expansive, very hard to put into words what he's doing. I mean, you could hear hints of the origins of the instruments, but he really takes it in his own direction, but still pays respect to again, to those traditions. And yeah, he's been doing it ever since, even before this, and still records for ECM to this day. Yeah, this one, yeah, again, 1977. Manfred Eicher produces this, so yeah, start of a very long and fruitful collaboration. But yeah, just one of the best. Comparable to an artist like Deuter, although I think he goes even further with the multi-instrumentalism. So you got a couple more here. Leonard Berg, Partial Solar Eclipse. Absolutely love this cover. Beautiful, atmospheric. Now the music, though, is more it's almost kind of a big band sound, but again, not in the traditional way. There's touches of that. So it was recorded in 1977 in Stockholm, Sweden, and a whole host of players on here, many of which I wasn't previously familiar with. Although you have Jan Christensen on drums, Gary's favorite drummer, and Bobo Stenson, piano, electric piano, and Aberg himself on soprano, alto, tenor saxes. And yeah, once again, there's it's tightly constructed, some really nice arranging on here, but also goes off into a little more freeform territory, but never so far out that it's a really nice way of kind of bringing it back in, to the original piece, but also very adventurous. Yeah, I hadn't listened to this one in quite a while, and gave it a fresh spin, and still, again, like a lot of this stuff is still very vibrant, and yeah, just a great example in the label. It's a really nice one. Dollar brand, African piano. I think I got this maybe a couple of years ago. I might have showed it in the video. Found it really cheap in a record shop up north. Probably because of the condition, though. It's pretty. It is pretty beat up. The record's not too bad, but the outer. You see the wonderful writings there. Yeah, solo piano recorded in 1969 live, and this is another one that kind of I'm thinking of like the old Road Buddy movies. It kind of, I don't know, it just sounds like it could be the soundtrack to just a couple people jumping in the car and hitting the road and just getting into these adventures. It just kind of has that feel to it. It sounds somewhere between like what Keith Jarrett was doing a few years later with some of the solo concerts. I'm thinking of, is it Lausanne Bremen from about 73? Kind of has that, the stuff he's doing with the left hand throughout is very like a highly rhythmic motif that he would play on the left hand, and very blues inflected, but soloing very fluidly. I'm also thinking of Terry Riley, what he was doing in the mid-90s, did the Lisbon concert, solo piano, where he was kind of returning to his own blues and jazz roots. It kind of brings that to mind. But yeah, it's highly rhythmic, very blues oriented, but also has kind of a, again, he kind of takes it out without going too far away from, it's not like in like Cecil Taylor territory or anything, but it does, there's a nice balance there. But yeah, really nice. And I don't know if this is the first Japo, but it's definitely one of the the earlier ones. But, yeah, definitely recommended for kind of another look at solo piano. And finally here, an excellent one, Rena Rama Landscapes. I have another copy of this actually, which I found quite a few years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. But Rob from Boston kindly sent me a copy, and I'm not sure. I'm actually not sure which is which at this point. But it's a wonderful album, 1977. This one's engineered by Jan Erik Kongshab, who has done a majority of the ECMs over the last well over 40 years now. And again, you have Leonard Berg from the previous album on tenor and soprano saxes and percussion, Bobo Stenson piano percussion, Paul Danielson on bass, and Leroy Lowe on drums percussion. I wasn't really that familiar with. And another one with a really neat sparse design. So who did? Dieter Bonhorst does the layout and cover design by Ola Loof. So yeah, it's very very neat, that kind of line drawing. And the music is just wonderful. For the most part, fairly straight ahead, but just really nice. It has a nice free flow to it. The sax player in particular is amazing. Really very fiery, very almost has like singing quality, but very kind of very to the point. There's very little overplaying. Just very powerful stuff. And Paul Danielson's bass really stands out on this. Has a certain, I don't know if I'd call it a polyrhythmic quality. His riffs and just his way of, he has almost kind of a bouncing, elastic quality. The way he goes from phrase to phrase is just yeah, really stands out on this for me. And of course, Bobo's a great player, and Leroy, who I hadn't heard of previously, is a really fine drummer. So yeah, just a really smoking album, I'd say. Just great stuff, and yeah, another great representation of the label. And yeah, I know I have a few more somewhere mentioning the Vandergelds and the Stefan Mikas. In fact, what's playing right now, however well it could be heard, East of the Night. This one's from 1985. Yeah, Japo ECM. And on here he plays mostly guitar and shakuhachi. Yeah, 10-string guitar, shakuhachi, 14-string guitar solo, and yeah, just great stuff. He's someone I'll have to do a video on, just showing his stuff, because been a long time fan. But yeah, it's terrific. And yeah, again, the label didn't last all that long, I don't think. Maybe till '85 or so. So maybe roughly 15 years and 40 to 50 albums. But some great stuff on here, and it's such a variety in that time. And again, the way it crossed over with ECM was always naturally what pulls me in further to it, and just wanting to hear more. So yeah, that'll do it for this time around. And this will be my last video for quite a while. Actually, I'm heading out of town on my annual Southwestern sojourn in a few days. So if I don't get, I'll try while I'm here to answer however many comments you all leave, and if I miss some messages, or if I'm not if I don't comment on your videos that I normally would comment on, not doing it to ignore you, or I'm actually as Teddy would say, eat sleep vinyl. For the most part, I'm planning on being away from all things internet for a while I'm away. So yeah, just gonna kind of get away from everything. So but once I'm back in town, definitely look forward to catching up with everyone, and answering everything, and yeah, and look forward to what hopefully I'll find out that way. So I hope you're all well. Thank you all for watching, and keeping warm wherever you're at. And until next time, peace, love, and joy.